Fantastic, thank you. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to join your stakeholder events today. My name is Dr. Esther Mukuka, and I am NIHR's Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And today I'll be talking about reframing diversity and inclusion and understanding the role of funders, particularly focusing on the role of NIHR. And because I'm still new, this presentation doesn't capture all of the responsibilities NIHR has, as I'm still in the exploration phase in my role, but I hope that I can share with you some of the work that NIHR has already done and maybe outline some of the things that we are interested in doing and outline our ambitions with you today. So a good place to start is really understanding what diversity and inclusion means. And you know, I know many people have seen these definitions time and time again, but in order to reframe diversity and inclusion, we've got to understand what diversity and inclusion means. So when we're talking about diversity, we're really talking about recognizing difference and acknowledging the benefit of having a range of perspectives in decision making, and the workforce being representative of the organization's customers. And when we're referring to inclusion, we're referring to a situation or a working environment where everybody's difference is valued, and they are used, the difference are used to enable everyone to thrive at work. So an inclusive environment is one in which everyone feels valued, that their contribution matters, and they are able to perform to their potential no matter their background, identity, or circumstances. So, like I said earlier, you know, these definitions have surfaced time and time again in the past 18 months. Everyone is probably familiar with the definitions and they are recognizable. However, it is my opinion that these definitions certainly overemphasize individual actors' attitudes and behaviors while neglecting some of the systemic organizational cultures that those actors reside in. And it also neglects the fact that for diversity and inclusion to be robust and successful, we really need interventions that are contextual, multi-level, and systematic in their approach to change. So in terms of NIHR, dealing with a very complex organization, focusing on individual attitudes is probably not the solution here. We've got to unpick what the context is, understand the context, take an approach that is multi-level and looking at the different levels, microcultures within NIHR, and designing interventions and innovative practices that need to be embedded at different levels, and taking a systematic approach to change. And also in reframing diversity and inclusion, I know that many people have focused a lot on diversity. And we know that the issues of the past 18 months have certainly brought to the surface issues around representation and ensuring that organizations are representative of the communities they serve. But I argue that diversity on its own isn't the answer. In fact, diversity needs to be anchored to inclusion, because representational diversity is not the antidote to the issues of inclusion and equity. And there needs to be a focus on understanding internal factors, so issues of inclusion within NIHR, for example, as well as understanding what the external fixes are. So in a typical organization, external fixes will be, for example, recruitment practices. And the next thing is, because diversity and inclusion issues are usually anchored in issues of social justice, we need to be ready to invest in the long game. So the issue of Black Lives Matter and Judge Floyd, the death of Judge Floyd, meant that last year a lot of people were making big statements about what they wanted to do with regards to diversity and inclusion. Organizations parachuted experts in to make them anti-racist or to teach them how to be anti-racist. And actually, when you're dealing with social justice issues, the focus is on transformative change. And transformative change does not exclude the transactional and the radical, but actually it's understanding that you cannot put sellotape on deep fractures, fractures within society. So in reframing diversity and inclusion, we've got to be ready to invest in the long game, to put our money where our mouth is, and understand that it's going to take a lot of work to overturn systematic bias and discriminations within systems and processes. And finally, on this point, in reframing diversity and inclusion, it is important that we build cultural competency within our interventions. So for diversity and inclusion interventions to be successful, it is important that we're putting cultural competencies at the heart of everything we do to ensure that the interventions are sustainable and that the impact is truly transformational. So now I'm going to move on to talk about some of the roles of Funda, where I think NIHR should be doing the work in understanding its role in NIHR, in diversity and inclusion. And I'll also highlight here some of the work that we've already started doing and what you can expect to see this year. So in reframing diversity and inclusion, NIHR needs to adopt a systems level approach to EDI. And I've really already started unpacking that. And this involves diagnosing, diagnosis and intervention needs to move away from the individual level to a systems level. And this is what I was talking about when I said introducing a systems level approach that is multi-level and systematic in its approach to diagnosing what the issues are and coming up with interventions that are applicable at different levels. And hence, it is important that we are creating robust evidence for EDI working in NIHR. So our focus this year is understanding what the data is telling us. So understanding what our quantitative data are telling us, but also what our qualitative data is telling us. And I stress the importance of qualitative because in doing inclusion work, we often neglect the importance of qualitative data. So we will be doing both, and we expect that we will have some quantitative data ready for the public later this year, in the autumn of this year. And initial data will be published on our research workforce, understanding the people who are recipients of our NIHR funding and fellowships. We'll be looking at our NIHR workforce, publishing data on our NIHR workforce, and also data on NIHR's advisory workforce. And in adopting this system level approach to change, what we want to do is create an altered state within NIHR. That is, we want to focus on diagnosing the cultures and microcultures within the organization. And we now want to embed new sets of norms that enhance equity and inclusion for all types of underrepresented groups. And this includes examining and altering our systems and processes. So we will be unpacking what our funding processes are and ensuring that we're embedding EDI and inclusive practices within our ways of working and our systems, application forms, and all the other processes that people experience when they come to us for funding. And here's just a diagram of the system, an example of the system level approach we want to take. This is one where we look at our policies, our communications and engagement, which is very important. We want to look at NIHR processes in its entirety. So from what our programs do to all the way to our research and training and careers, we want to take a systemic approach to unpicking them and ensuring that we're embedding EDI in there. As I've already discussed, data collection and tracking, which we'll be paying attention to. And we want to have a robust evidence base and to build research, learning, and evidence within everything we're doing. So NIHR has, we want to have an approach to EDI that nurtures an ongoing culture of learning and development. And we will be working this year on scoping what that actually means for NIHR, how much investment goes into that piece of work, and how we create a framework for learning and development for NIHR's people. And ultimately, we will be publishing a 5-year strategy this financial year that would showcase what our long-term ambition is with regards to EDI. So reframing diversity and inclusion means recognizing that there is a leaky pipeline. And the leaky pipeline is a serious issue. For NIHR to be truly diverse in everything it wants to do, we've got to understand that we need innovative approaches for attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. This means turning our attention to the leaky pipeline and building infrastructures leading to diversity in biomedical research. So I'm really passionate for NIHR to take a look back at what is happening at undergraduate level, at master's level, and understanding how many people from underrepresented backgrounds are dropping out as a result of a leak in the pipeline, and what role as a funder do we play in building an infrastructure that will lead to diversity in biomedical research. We also need to be addressing underrepresentation in research ideas that become fully funded projects. So are there any leaks in the pipeline in terms of the people who come to us with research ideas and who makes it all the way to be fully funded? And is there something we can be doing there in terms of maybe introducing particularly commissioned projects, for example, that focuses on EDI specific topics, related topics. And also we want to understand the success rates for underrepresented groups in the funding process. And this links back to the data work that we're doing, which will be published in the autumn of this year. And then finally, we want to link cognitive diversity to representational diversity. And this means ensuring not just that the traditional protected characteristics like race and gender are represented, but really focusing on making sure different ways of thinking are represented within NIHR. And one of the ways that we are doing this is in our strategy development consultation process. We want to ensure that we're bringing different voices on board. We want to hear from our different stakeholders, and we want to hear what the priorities are for our different stakeholders and engage with our stakeholders in a prioritization process, which means that we are all in agreement on what NIHR needs to focus on, the few things that NIHR needs to focus on first. Representational diversity is still very important to us, and we recognize that it's important for our cognition. So we are working on greater diversity on our committees. And we want to ensure that the people who are signing off on our research projects and making the decision about what project to fund are diverse, come from diverse backgrounds, and there's cognitive diversity on the board as well. So these are just a few things that we're focusing on, and these are a few things that I believe funders need to pay attention to in terms of understanding their role in diversity and inclusion. I'll stop here now and open up for any further questions. I'm happy to expand there are many other things we're working on, but because of time, I can't go into everything. I'll hand over to the host. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther, for this tour